Hello, this is Jane Coombs, and the subject I'm covering today is attendance management for managers, or how to manage absence in your team or in your company. It's aimed for managers who have little or no support and training in this, and you're just learning it as you're going along. So, this will really help you. Also, if you haven't got occupational health service or HR to be able to advise you. And it's really about you finding your way and me helping you to think about ways to do that. Many many larger companies offer training which is usually based on your company policy, legal issues, and people management. This training is different. I am not focusing on policy. You may not have one, or the paperwork you might be expected to do. That is a given. No, this is about people coming to work or not coming to work. And when one of your team calls in sick, either for a week or longer, or maybe it's just the odd day here and there with the stomach upset, headaches, or cold, can be very disruptive. What do? You may suspect someone is not really sick, and this is very common. But what do you do about it? How do you act? This training leans more to reassuring you of the right behaviour to adopt, what to say, when to intervene, when to be strict, when to be kind, when to be sympathetic. The main aim of the course being keeping people at work, making sure they're safe, happy, motivated, and engaged. When people think about the benefit of work, they will only think about their salary earned. But work provides so much more than income. It gives us structure to our day, social contact, a sense of purpose, opportunities for achievement, and is often a significant part of our identity. This is one reason why prolonged absence can be so damaging. People may lose confidence, become isolated, and begin to feel disconnected from both their workplace and their normal routine. Sometimes they become anxious about returning to work, even when their health has improved, wondering how they'll be received, if they're still able to do their job, what people thought of them while they were off, what do they know? When someone is off sick, it costs you that daily rate. So that's the bit about the salary. That cost is obvious. But do you consider the hidden costs of replacement, of getting over the hump of someone being off sick, like missed deadlines, team stress, the panic it costs you as a manager, especially if a number of staff phone in? How will you cover the absence? It's important to think about these things before they happen. Look at company policy if you have one. What are the procedures you and the employee must follow? For example, forms to fill in, fit notes to file, notifications to make. Remember too that while there are no specific laws regarding absence, many impact on how you treat someone who is sick. For example, the Equality Act, which I'll be covering later, statutory sick pay, health and safety. You as the manager are in charge of this on behalf of your company. One of the biggest mistakes I see, and I work in occupational health and strategic management for companies, one of the biggest mistakes is managers confusing kindness with effective management. Now, you can be supportive and understanding while still maintaining attendance standards and applying your policy fairly. By the way, if you don't have a policy, it's best to think about writing a few rules for yourself and other managers in the company, as this ensures all managers are doing the same and there is a consistent approach across the whole organisation. Something I see is employees texting their managers to say they're off sick. Not a good idea. This takes away an amount of responsibility on their part. They need to talk to you or your deputy. It's not enough to send a brief text message and then turn their phones off. You need to always communicate with your staff. If you feel a problem is building in terms of absence or illness, talk to them. Set out your concerns, be honest. what you have noticed, how can you help support them, how it might be causing problems for you with the team and other people, or your deliveries or customer service. You need to explain this and say that you need to do something about it. From a legal perspective, there are two viewpoints for employees who are or claim to be sick. Are they too ill to work, which is called capability, or are they just refusing to come to work, which is about conduct? Two different types of absence, but in the early stages of reporting, you should not be worrying about if the sickness is genuine or not. You don't need to know. Just need to treat everyone the same and assume it's genuine. This will clear your mind of how to treat an employee. What you need to do is ask, what's wrong? When will you be returning? Is it related to your work at all? You may need them to see their GP for statutory sick pay purposes to get a fit note. A common management mistake is to think someone is a wimp for perhaps, say, having a headache. You have headaches all the time. Or believing they are taking a duvet day. The safest approach is to assume the illness or excuse is genuine. If the evidence later points elsewhere, you can consider conduct procedures. However, before taking disciplinary action, managers need evidence, not assumptions. I've seen managers absolutely convinced someone was swinging the lead, only to discover there was a genuine medical problem. Equally, I've seen situations where people are off sick for a month and have been taking a holiday abroad, hoping no one notices. Childcare and transport issues are common areas of difficulty nowadays. Sometimes it's easier to phone in sick than come in late. If the absence is genuine, the employee will be treated fairly and respectfully. If the absence turns out not to be genuine, the process will usually identify that over time. Either way, the manager is protected because they have followed a fair procedure. Larger or more affluent companies have HR or occupational health advice available. If you have them and have concerns about any aspect of absence, contact those for advice. They will guide you safely through the process, pointing out your specific responsibilities, language to use, and your options. However, if you don't have them, this training will serve as guidance, so keep it handy. Whichever it might be, there are steps to take which will support your conclusion. Collect evidence, behaviours, incidents, conversations, written documents such as emails, social media posts, fit notes, and take note of any conversations that you have. Not only is there the issue of capability or conduct with absence, absence is treated differently, whether it's long-term or short-term. I will deal with long-term absence first, and it lasts over 4 weeks generally. Here, the manager must make long-term plans to cover for the sick member of staff. I've already talked about how work supports well-being beyond just income, how it contributes to identity and self-worth. So long-term sickness absence counteracts all the good of being employed. People become isolated, wondering what their colleagues are thinking about them. Are they angry with them? Supportive? Have they even remembered who they are? When you are ill and isolated, thoughts can become distorted. Many people become anxious of actually walking back into work, so the manager must understand this and keep the employee engaged and connected. Simple phone calls. It's best to schedule these. Help with this. Ask how they are and to reassure them that they're still part of the team. It will make a huge difference. Invite them in for a chat or a cup of coffee when they are able. One case sticks in my mind. When I worked in local government, a manager called me with a problem he had. A valued long-term employee, an architect, had recently told him he had motor neuron disease. The GP had signed him off for 3 months and suggested he apply for ill health retirement. The architect was devastated by the illness itself, but also because he loved his work. He was a wheelchair user now, so mobility and fine movements were the main problem. His mind and memory were not affected. Could he return to work? The manager was keen to support him, so after lengthy discussions with the man's family, the team, health and safety, occupational health, etc., the architect returned to work. There were barriers, but everyone was willing to find a workaround. They arranged wheelchair access, a bespoke telephone system, buddy system, well-being facilities, computer setup, etc. The whole team and others rallied round to enable him to come back to his job, where he remained for another 6 months. It was a moving experience for everyone involved. Of course, some jobs are more difficult to manage than others, but there are usually workarounds for tasks. Be flexible, creative, and remember, if a person is off sick, they are still on your head count and probably being paid, depending on your sick pay scheme. Why would you not consider a rehabilitation program that's a gradual return to work, perhaps reduced hours initially, or removing some of the problematic tasks of the job for a set period? Not only do you get the person back earlier, but there is no added cost for temporary cover, and people actually remember being treated like that. The best way to get an employee back after a long-term illness is to discuss how this might look early in their recovery stage. Keep in touch. Ask what they think they can and can't do. They know their own job. Put plans in place and review progress. A successful return to work program brings everybody benefits. Your role as a manager is to manage attendance and ensure employees can work safely and effectively. So schedule or set up a return to work discussion. It's best done face to face, but if that isn't practical, then use the phone. And remember, do this for absolutely everybody. Don't pick and choose. One of the biggest fears for many managers is being drawn into a blow-by-blow account of a hysterectomy, a broken toe, or a stomach bug. But the purpose of the return to work discussion is not about the illness. It's to establish whether the employee is fit to resume their duties, whether any support is needed, and whether work may have contributed to that absence. I have a reminder word that takes me through the process. It's warm. W, welcome the person back. Ask about the reason for absence, and absence is the A in warm. Remind them of their responsibilities in relation to absence. Then move on to today. That's the M, what the arrangements are, if any. A good opener after the welcome back, say, I don't need to know the intimate details of your operation. What I do need to know is whether you're fit to do your job and whether there's anything we need to help you. For long-term absence, return to work, the discussion should cover the support the person needs, although the meeting should be just to confirm the arrangements you have already discussed on the phone prior to this day. Clarify any temporary or permanent adjustments to the job, review periods and timeframes for action. For example, we'll start you off working at the beginning of the line for a few days, it's lighter there, and if that is okay, we can move you to the more physical side of things. So we'll have another meeting next week. Remember too, and this is often overlooked, tell them the pay situation. Will they be paid part-time, full-time? And will the rehabilitation program impact on their absence record? The employee is often reluctant to ask the question. For short-term absence, the setup is the same. but there is a difference in the discussion. I've covered this in one of the next slides. Short-term absence. Ironically, short-term absence can be more difficult for managers. Headache, stomachache, flus and colds, odd days here and there, phoning in at 7 a.m. when everything is all set up to go. Suddenly, you might be 2 people short, deadlines missed and poor customer service. Repeated absences may indicate an underlying health condition for the person, or perhaps there's personal difficulties, childcare or domestic issues, team issues, or just poor attendance habits. Here, the manager and worker have a private, serious return to work discussion about the latest absence. The difference is that you must let the employee know that their level of absence cannot continue and discuss any concerns or questions you might have. It may be appropriate to ask them to go to their doctor, or if there are domestic issues, perhaps a temporary change to duties to support them. If it is a repeat offender for short-term absence and you have evidence to support your suspicion of non-illness, now is the time to voice it. A good way to illustrate their absence pattern is to have an official list of the person's absences and the reasons they've given. Often the person has forgotten the reasons for absence, probably because it was a duvet day, or how many days they've actually taken. Give the person a chance to explain or expand. Often the offender will admit to not realizing the problem or that they had accumulated so many instances. Here is where you remind them of their responsibility to come to work. Explain the disruption to the team and the production targets, etc. There is also the implicit, or not so implicit, warning that disciplinary action may be taken if attendance levels don't improve. Many managers and some employees assume that every health condition automatically falls under disability legislation and they can't be reprimanded for related absences. That's not the case. The legal definition of disability is clear and companies must survive. You can't have people just taking days off willy-nilly. Also, a manager can't invent a job for a disabled person. ACAS has brilliant guidance on this, and I'll leave the link for that advice on the final slide, the resources slide. Managers should never dismiss a health condition because it isn't obvious. And it's not the role of the manager to make legal judgments, but to seek advice, consider reasonable adjustments, and make informed decisions. Managers also need to remember that supporting one employee should not create unreasonable difficulties for the rest of the team because the workforce is aging and you've got to think of these things now. Managers are increasingly supporting employees with long-term health conditions. The challenge is not whether support should be provided, but how to provide it fairly and sustainably for the company. If you have an occupational health or HR service, you can ask for advice. However, managers who know their teams well are usually best placed to spot when something isn't right or something's wrong with somebody. The key is not to make assumptions, but to have a conversation. There are schemes with attendance triggers, Bradford factors, and absence management thresholds, and they can be useful management tools, but they should never replace management judgment. See the link on the resources slide for more information and resources templates from ACAS and others. It's important as well to think about yourself as a manager. Remember, other employees in your team watch how a manager behaves too. If you discuss another person's health condition loudly, roll your eyes when someone calls in sick, or use sarcastic comments or gestures, employees quickly learn that their own information may not be treated with respect and may hide the truth from you in future. You must treat every employee with dignity, even when you suspect they're not being entirely truthful. The personal behaviour of a manager is important too. Do not ignore poor behaviour in your teams, hoping it will go away. Usually, if you mishandle a situation, give preferential treatment, or are too lenient, it will be noticed. Employees will quickly learn how to deal with you to their advantage. Knowing there is no challenge, the team start doing their own thing. So always act quickly and publicly when issues arise. Put it right. Another common mistake is treating everyone as a friend. I see this most often in new managers who find themselves on the other side of the fence. Once they were one of the boys, now it's difficult to change how to interact with your former team workers. It feels uncomfortable to tell them what to do. An example here. In my capacity as an occupational health professional, I was asked to look at a high absence level in one department. Its level was twice that of any other in the company. I discovered that the supervisor, when taking a call from someone calling in absent, was so sympathetic, telling the person to go to bed and look after themselves. They would manage. He called everyone mate and almost gave permission for people to take 2 days off instead of one. When people returned, he would wave to them and walk on. No inquiry about illness, no reminders of his job role and how others had to step in or miss deadlines, no consequences for the returner. Had anybody even noticed, they might wonder. Not surprisingly, the absence levels in that department skyrocketed. After training and support, the manager understood his role more and became more of a manager than a friend. So, to have a robust attendance process, always remind returners of the process and why it is important for people to attend work. Good managers can be compassionate while still maintaining standards and applying an attendance policy fairly. You are a manager, not a friend, lawyer, jailer, or a detective. You need to manage your people, and dealing with sick people is a key part of your role. So to summarise, the important things to remember, this presentation covers the main issues of attendance management, and good management encourages regular attendance and successful returns to work, which ultimately will make your job easier. Do not get into health details. Ensure you make this plain to the person in front of you in the return to work. You do not want details of health, merely the headlines and whether a person can do the job safely and effectively. Always do return to work interviews on everyone who has been off sick. Don't pick and choose. Remember the word warm as your template. That is, welcome, that's the W. Welcome the person back. Talk about their absence, that's the A. Remind them of their responsibility to be at work. And then M, move on. I call it warm, a warm return to work. Welcome back, absence discussion, responsibilities, and then move on. Remember, you as a manager are employed to support people, but you also represent the organisation. If absence is not managed effectively, customer service suffers, colleagues come under pressure, and in extreme cases, the organisation itself can struggle. Good attendance management is therefore about balancing compassion with organisational sustainability. These simple rules mentioned in this presentation will serve you well. Bookmark this presentation for future reference and look out for my written guidance on this very large subject sometime in the future. Thank you for listening. This is the last slide in the presentation, and it gives you more resources. Firstly, my contact details. I write now on Substack, and there's my link there. If you're interested in reading some of my other books on workplace health and safety and well-being, visit my author page on Amazon. There's also fiction there if you're interested. For information on the UK government rules for statutory sick pay, the link is here, plus information on the footnote and ways you can actually use the footnote and the GP to your advantage. Finally, 2 articles from me, one dealing with sickness absence without the drama, and the other a short guide on return to work interviews, which I mentioned in the presentation. There's also ACAS guidance on disability at work with some templates, great stuff there. Anyway, thank you for watching. I'd love it if you subscribe to my channel. Thank you. There's more to come. Bye-bye.